groups, then why people join groups, what is a team, what's a group, how they differ. We've seen that team is a more formalized way of looking at groups, although the terms are used interchangeably, but a team is a more specific form of a group. So there could be different kinds of teams in an organization, like a problem-solving team, or how they work, depending on how they are, a cross-functional team, and so on, or a virtual team nowadays. So these are types of teams. Then we had discussed the 5-stage model of group development in the previous class, and we saw that when a group is formed, especially nowadays in business organizations, there's a lot of focus on cross-functional groups or teams or project teams. So in a project team, what happens is that you form a group, you give them a task, and then the group is independent, autonomous. They work on that task, and once the task is over, the group is disbanded, and they can go back to their respective departments or units again. Again, some new group may be formed. So this model says that when a group is formed, they don't start working from the moment they are formed. There are several stages which the group undergoes. So we have initial conflict and all that, and then somebody takes the lead and tries to resolve the conflict. So some norms evolve out of that, some common standards evolve, some common codes of conduct evolve, and then the group starts performing. So the actual work starts only in stage 4, and a lot of time may often be wasted in the first 3 stages. Now it is the responsibility of the organization, it is the responsibility of leaders and the group people to ensure that there is minimal time that goes in forming and storming and all these stages, and quickly the group should come to performing. That is the stage which is most critical. So maximum time and effort and energy and resources should go into the performing stage. That is what we have to do. But the reality is that in a lot of cases, there's a lot of time that goes away, gets wasted in forming and norming and all these stages, because the group members may not know each other, they may not be comfortable with each other, they may not be aware of each other's strengths or weaknesses or capabilities. They may not be aware of what exactly they have to start working on and how they have to start working. So there's a lot of training, and there's a lot of coaching, and a lot of leadership mentoring that has to go into developing good teams. So how we develop good teams is something that we will take up. I discussed last time also. We'll take it up in the subsequent slides. Right now, I'm only discussing the stages of group development, and this is how groups evolve. This is how groups work. There's another model which is called as the punctuated equilibrium model. This model also explains how groups work, how they start working. And the idea behind this model is the same as in the previous model, that groups don't start working right from the first day or from the moment that they're formed. They don't start working with the same momentum. They undergo different stages. The second model also says the same thing, but in a slightly different manner. It says that when groups are formed, there is a difference in terms of the speed with which they start working. So when a group is formed, they may have, let's say, a first meeting on day 1, and then there is a phase of inertia, a phase 1. If you can see in the figure, can you see this figure? The punctuated equilibrium model?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So if you see this phase 1, so this is time. So when the time starts for the group to start working, we see that there is a long phase 1. And what is this phase 1? The phase 1 is a phase of inertia. The group is not doing anything. Sometimes what happens is that half of the time just goes like this. A plus B divided by 2, what is this? So basically they are indicating that this is almost half of the time, which is just going in phase 1, which is inertia. The group has met, some initial discussion may have taken place, some initial ice breaking may have taken place, but real performance has not started, real activity has not started. It's only after some time that the group realizes that, oh, we have to start working, and it's high time, and we need to now really gear up and start working, that the group undergoes transition. So in a lot of cases, the group undergoes transition after half the time has gone away. So if 5 days are there, 2 days probably are just wasted in, initial norming, storming kind of phases. And it's only after that that the group realizes that now we have to start working. So there is a sudden transition. So if you look at this, there is sudden spike in performance. So the group will start working, and then there will be sudden increase in performance. Then what happens is that after having completed significant part of the work, the group again becomes complacent, and they again go into a state of inertia, which is phase 2. Again, in the last phase, again there will be a slowing down. That okay, now we've done most of the work, we are happy. So again there is a certain inertia which is there. And then finally, when the time is just about to be over for that particular project or that particular target, then again the group will start working, and again they will just quickly wind up and complete. So this is how normally all groups work. Whether it's a group, given a certain target or a certain project or a certain problem solving issue, this is how most groups work. So a lot of time just goes in inertia. It is not that the group will work at the same pace and momentum all the time. The pace and momentum will change, and this is how it changes. It happens with us also. For example, if we give you a class assignment, if we give you a class project, and we make a team of 4 people, the same thing happens. If I tell you that, okay, you have to do this group assignment in OB, and you have to submit next Tuesday. Now what happens? You don't start working right away, after the OB class. You don't start working. Maybe you discuss today with your friends, you kind of discuss an initial idea, and then the next 2 days, 3 days, you're okay, you forget about it. And then again, after 3 days, the group decides, oh, let's meet, let's start working. And then you meet, and then you assign activities, and then everybody starts working on, Thursday or Friday or something like that. And then after having done 80% of the work, again, you feel, okay, now most of the work is done. Only final report writing is there. So we can again relax. So Saturday, Sunday, again, you will relax. Monday, suddenly, again, you will wake up. Oh, tomorrow we have to submit the report. And then you will start writing and all that. So the group undergoes phases of inertia, transition, inertia, transition. So it doesn't work with the same pace and momentum. Now, this happens everywhere. This happens in business organizations also. So it's a natural tendency, because we'll not be working with the same pace all through. So certain things are natural also. But the problem is that if too much of time is going in the inertia stage, then probably the group's effectiveness is not maximized or optimized, because too much of time is going in the inertia phase. The people in the group are too, easy or complacent or lazy or whatever, and then they are therefore spending too much time in this inertia phase, which is something which is not beneficial for the organization. It's not good for the organization. So this is where leaders have to intervene. This is where, some kind of strategy has to be adopted, some kind of mechanism has to be adopted to ensure that the group is motivated, and the group realizes that, we have this time, let us try to utilize this time, and let's try to get the best out of it. So it's here that you require a lot of leadership, intervention, motivation, to ensure that this inertia phase is minimized and the momentum phase is kind of maximized. So this model also explains how groups work, the punctuated equilibrium model. So these models, they basically explain that group working undergoes phases of, inertia. Group working undergoes phases of norming or storming or whatever. And this is where we have to adopt corrective strategies. This is where we have to adopt certain interventions to ensure that group effectiveness and group synergy is maximized. So this is what the model is. I already explained, so there's no need to reiterate this. I'll move ahead. So these two models, they explain how groups work. Now, I'm going to discuss the properties that are there in a group, different kinds of characteristics and features which are there in a group, and how these characteristics and features, they impact us, or they impact group working. So group structure is what I'm going to discuss now. And the first property of group structure that I'm going to discuss today is roles. Now, what is a role? A role is any kind of behavior that is expected from me in the position that I'm occupying. So as a teacher, I have a certain role to play. As a student, you have some role to play. The chairman may have some roles to play. The dean may have some roles to play. So we all have roles to play. And I'm talking about workplace roles. Okay. So it is a set of expected behavioral patterns which are attributed to someone occupying a certain position. So for example, as a teacher, I may be expected to take my class or give my lecture, discuss your issues with you, take a sessional, give you marks, discuss the sessional feedback with you, and maybe other things, discuss your problems that you're facing in the class, anything that you're not understanding, and so on and so forth. Similarly, I may have some other roles in the department. I may be occupying some position or whatever. Then in that position, I may be having some other roles to play. So roles are what is expected out of you in a certain position, in a certain the position that you're occupying. There are certain key behaviors which are expected out of you. These are roles. Now, related to the concept of role are several other concepts which are important. One concept which is very important is role identity. Role identity is, my ability to identify with my role, the attitudes and behaviors consistent with that role. So, for example, I may be a teacher, but maybe I'm not able to identify with the role that a teacher is supposed to have. Now, in that case, what will happen? If I'm not able to identify as a teacher, then obviously I cannot be a good teacher because I'm not able to identify with the role of being a teacher. So role identity is a very important concept in organizations. There are a lot of instances where people are not able to identify with their roles. So I may be an HR manager, but my personality may be different, and I may not be suitable to be an HR manager. So I'm not able to identify with that role. Or you may be an advertising manager, but maybe your personality is not suited for that. Maybe you are more suited for a finance role. So what happens is that when we have a different personal framework and different personality and different characteristics and features and preferences and likes and dislikes and so on, in a lot of instances, people may not be able to identify with their roles. And when they are not able to identify with their roles, there is an inconsistency. There could be a dissonance, as we discussed in the previous classes. And when that happens, to perform well. And that is why when I discussed personality with you in the previous classes, I discussed this idea that we have, the big five personality, and we have the other frameworks which are there, which are used by business organizations to identify people's personalities and then give them a role which is suitable to their personality. Because unless there is role identity, I will not be able to perform effectively in my role. So the organization has to know what kind of characteristics I have, what is my temperament, what is my psychology, and then I should be given roles and tasks and activities which suit that. In certain cases, when there is a incompatibility, the organization can give me some training also. They can give me some coaching and some mentoring and guidance can be given so that I try to understand what my role is. But unless role identity is there, a person will not be able to perform effectively in that role. So role identity is important in a group. When you make a group, the leader has to be a leader. The resource provider has to be a resource provider. The person who's in a way executing the task has to be good in executing, and so on. So whatever assignments you're giving to people, they have to be good in that assignment. They have to be good in that activity. Then role perception. It's an individual's view of how he or she is supposed to act. That is my perception of my role. Differently. And I perceive my role differently. So role perception is my perception of my role. If my perception is wrong, I will not be able to understand my role. And if I'm not able to understand my role, I'll not be able to perform. So clear instructions have to be given to people so that they are able to understand what is expected out of me, what is expected in this role, what am I supposed to do. When that happens, only then I will be able to perform effectively. Only then I will be in a position to, execute my role effectively. So this is what is important in a role. Role perceptions have to be clear. Then,
Ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am.
Just a second, let me complete this part, then I'll come. Role expectations. Role expectations is the other's expectation, what others are expecting from me. So I have to be clear about my own perception of my own role. And I also have to be clear about what others expect from my role. What do my, for example, team members expect from me? What does my manager expect from me? What does my leader expect from me? So I have to know the expectations that others have from me. Again, if I don't know that, I will not be able to perform my role in an effective manner. So whatever roles we assign to people, we also have to ensure that they are clear about the expectations that others have. They are clear about what exactly they have to do. They are clear about the identity. All these things have to be thought about. Only then people will be able to perform their roles effectively. Then there is something which is called as a psychological contract. Psychological contract are those unsaid, unwritten rules and regulations, which are not, as I said, they're not written down, they are not told, but they are there, unsaid, unwritten, codes of conduct, which I have to understand. As a teacher, I have to understand. Not everybody, everything has to be told to me. I must know certain things that a teacher has to do without those things being written down anywhere. As a student, you have to know certain things without those things being written down anywhere. So we don't write down everything. We don't lay down rules and regulations for everything. There are certain things which are unsaid, unwritten. We have to understand that. But okay, if I'm an HR manager, this is what is expected from me and I have to do this. So not everything is written or told, but there are certain things which are unwritten, which I have to understand in my role. So there is a psychological contract which is there for every role. And the person who's occupying that role, the incumbent, has to understand this unwritten, unsaid psychological contract. And then there is this concept of role conflict. If role expectations are not clear, if role perception is not clear, if role identity is not clear, then in all of those cases, there will be role ambiguity or role conflict. I will have some conflict in terms of what I'm doing and what I'm supposed to do, in terms of what role I'm playing and what role I should actually play, or what role my team members expect me to play. So if clarity is not there, role conflict will be there. So that is why organizations have to ensure that whenever teams are framed, every person in the team knows what their roles are, what is the other person's roles, what does that person expect from me, how I have to behave, and so on. And unless this happens, people will not be able to perform effectively in their role. So this is the importance of role, that in a team, if there are 5 people, every person will have a different role to play, and they have to be clear about what those roles are. Somebody was saying something.
Yes, ma'am.
Kanishka, yes.
Ma'am, can we say that role expectations and role perception comes under role identity?
Yes, they are all related. They are all related concepts. Role identity is basically your identity with the role that you identify. You relate to that role. When I'm saying identify, means you like what you're doing. You relate to it. As an individual, I like what I'm doing or the role that I'm into. So that is role identity. And of course, once you like your role, naturally there will be clearer perception of what you're supposed to do and so on. So they're all intertwined concepts, interrelated concepts, but they are different also, because role identity is your ability to identify with the role. Role perception is your perception about what you're supposed to do. Role expectation is your understanding of what others expect from you, what others want from your role. So these are all slightly different concepts, but all interrelated concepts, right? Okay. So the role is one thing. So roles have to be clear. Otherwise, there will be role conflict. And if there is role conflict, there will be problems. So coming back to the same thing, unless role perceptions and expectations are clear, there will be role conflict and ambiguity, resulting in lower group performance. Leaders and followers need to know each other's expectations. Role identity is crucial for group synergy. So that is the importance of role. Now coming to the second characteristic, norms, just like roles are important, so are norms also important. What are norms? Norms are different from rules. Rules are more, rigid instructions which have to be followed. Norms are more flexible. They may be written, they may not be written also. These are acceptable standards of behavior within a group. Certain things that are considered to be acceptable standards of behavior that we are supposed to follow, certain common norms. There could be performance norms. For example, in a group, all of us want to have, let's say if it's a sales group, all of us have a norm that at least we will have this much of sales in the next week or next month. So there is a performance norm that we may set up that at least this much we will try to do. There could be appearance norms in certain groups. Appearance norms means in terms of how the group appears, there could be certain norms that we may evolve. For example, some organizations have uniforms. Some organizations have dress codes. Some organizations have norms in terms of where the group will sit and how they will work, what kind of office furniture they will use, and so on. Some commonality. So appearance norms may be there in terms of the tangibles and how they appear. So, for example, when you have a uniform for everybody in the organization, or when you have a certain, we'll wear this badge or something, or we'll wear a certain kind of a tie or shirt or whatever, you're trying to ensure that everybody is in a way bound together with certain identity. And that identity, in a way, gives everyone some kind of common feeling. So appearance norms may be there. Social interaction norms may be there. For example, how we will converse, where we will converse, who will do the talking, and so on. So we may evolve norms in terms of social interactions, whether we will meet physically or we will meet virtually. So those kinds of social interaction norms a group may develop. Similarly, there could be norms related to allocation of resources, how we will allocate the resource. So these are just some types of norms that may exist. Basically, the idea is that we have to have some norms. We have to have some common acceptable standards of behavior so that the group knows that this is the minimum which is expected from us. This is how we have to perform. This is how we have to communicate. This is how we have to relate with each other. So some acceptable standards of behavior have to be evolved in a group. Now, what is the relevance of norms? For that, we often discuss this human relations school theory, the Hathorne studies. I'm sure you must be aware of the Hathorne experiment. Have you read about this? This Hathorne experiment is basically an experiment that is related to this idea of group norm. Have you read about it? Maybe in the first semester you have.
Yes, ma'am, in concept of management.
Yeah, concept. What is it? What is the Hathorne study? Where was it conducted? Who conducted it? What
he conducted an experiment about the illumination, that how the productivity increase or decrease with the increasing or decreasing the illumination in a working condition, working environment.
And so what happened?
What he analyzed that the productivity was not actually affected by changing the illumination. So he gave so many conclusions that I'm not able to recall right now.
Okay. But what was the basic idea?
Ma'am,
who was the person? Yes,
ma'am, workers of two sides were said that work is being done to help them improve the illumination of the area that they are working under. Illumination was improved, and the other side nothing was done. But it was found that both sides worked. Rate of work improved by the workers, which shows us that motivation. The workers were motivated because they felt that something was done for them, and it's that feeling led to their motivation in terms of work, and hence increased their productivity.
All right. Who conducted this experiment? Who's the person behind this? Elton Mayo, right? Elton Mayo was the person who behind this experiment. He was Elton Mayo is supposed to be a pioneer in human behavior and organizational behavior thoughts. He was the one who actually, because before that, not much work was done in terms of workers and worker behavior or worker performance and so on. So Elton Mayo was undertaking some research on the physical conditions of a factory and how the physical conditions impact workers. So they conducted this study on Western Electric Company's, Hathorn factory, and they thought that, let us see that does the light, illumination, have any impact on workers' performance and productivity? Because it was at that time, it was felt that the working condition, illumination, lighting, all that will impact worker performance. So what happened was, and there are different interpretations in different groups. So in different books. So maybe the book that you read, there was a different interpretation. But what primarily happened was that they conducted a study on a group, and when the group started working in the factory, they started increasing the illumination, the light. And as the light increased, obviously, when you're working in a dark environment, there is problem, you can't see properly, so your performance and productivity will be low. So when the lighting was gradually increased, the experimenters realized that workers' productivity also increased. So they concluded that yes, productivity is a function of illumination and lighting. If there is proper light, naturally you can do better. You can read better, you can operate a machine better. If you're in a badly lit room, which is not having proper lighting and ventilation, you can't work. So it was concluded that yes, ventilation or lighting or illumination does have an impact on productivity. Then after some time, what happened was that they started decreasing the light, decreasing the illumination, assuming that as we decrease the illumination, worker productivity will go down. But interestingly, what happened was that worker productivity did not go down. It kept on increasing. So then the experimenters, they concluded that means that there is something else. It's not just light and illumination which is impacting worker productivity, because despite the fact that we decreased illumination, productivity still kept on, improving. So it means there is something else. And what is this something else? It was this something else that led to naming of the movement as Human Relations Movement, Human Relations School. It said that it was this group, feeling, this human relationship that was leading to increase in productivity. So it's not just illumination and lighting or an AC which is going to impact your productivity. How you connect with the group, your group leader, the behavior of the group leader, the behavior of group members towards each other. This human relationship aspect is very important in working of a group. So the group influences. So they saw that when the group was working, all the people in the group were interacting with each other. The group leader was, talking to them, providing them encouragement and so on. So they felt that it was this human aspect which was more important than lighting and illumination and so on. So group influences, norms, they are important. When we identify with the group, if I like my group members, identify with them, if I have good, human relationships with them, then I will work with them effectively, and our performance will improve. On the other hand, if there is lack of norms, lack of identity, lack of commonality in the group, then we may be in a very good chamber, very well lit and with very nice furniture and everything, yet we will not work because we are not having this group camaraderie, as we call it. This human relationship is missing. This common norms that a group is supposed to have is missing. So physical conditions are important. The physical setting, the factory, the type of machines you're using, the physical layout, all that is important. But even more important is how the group is treated, what kind of communication is taking place, how the group is relating to each other. So the human relationship aspect is more important, and that it was after this experiment that this entire thought, this theoretical framework, this human relation movement started, and Elton Mayo and his team, they started espousing the idea that companies must pay attention to workers, their interaction, the human relations, the behavioral issues. They are also important, and it is not just physical setting or a factory setting or the physical layout which is important. So human relations school, it espouses the idea that group norms are important. Unless you have a common norm, unless everybody identifies with those norms, the group will not function. everything will fall apart, and the group will not be working in an effective manner. So you have to ensure that there are common ideas, there are common themes which are there. People relate to those ideas, people identify with those ideas, and they work as per those common norms. So this is the idea of norms in a group. This is the importance of norms in a group, that everybody has to identify with some common standards. So that's what we mean by norms. Now, when we discuss norms, there are several important concepts that we discuss. For example, reference groups. Reference groups are groups to which individuals belong, or they want to belong, whose norms they identify with or they like to conform. So for example, in a class, if I give you an assignment and I ask you to make a group, you will naturally make groups with those students with whom you are comfortable, who are your friends. Why? Because you feel there is some commonality with those people. So we like to have a reference group and we want to be with that group. So reference groups exist in organizations also. People identify with some types of other people, some people in terms of skill, or some people in terms of area to which they belong. There will be some reference groups. And when we work with those reference groups, we often have common norms and things like that. So people want to be part of those reference groups, and reference groups do exist in organizations. Conformity is the idea of conforming to the norms, conforming to what the group feels like. So adjusting one's behavior to align with the norm of the group. Now, conformity is a very interesting concept. Conformity is both good and bad. And that is why we say norms are both good and bad. Can somebody reflect on this? What is this? Conformity is both good and bad. Conforming means relating to the group and identifying with the group and working as per the common norms. But we said conformity is both good and bad. And because conformity is good and bad, norms may also be good and bad. Can someone tell me what exactly is this? Hayat?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get the question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, conformity can be good in terms we are getting along with the team, but it could be bad in terms like we are adjusting our own efficiency just to work with the team.
Right. So it's good because you have to get along. It's important to get along. If you want the group to work synergistically, then you have to conform. There have to be certain norms and we have to conform to those norms. But as you rightly said, sometimes you adjust as per the group norms. And too much of adjustment may not be good. We say too much of conformity is not good. It's not good because, Talha, why is it not good? Too much of conformity?
Sorry, ma'am?
Why is too much of conformity not good for the group? So I'm trying to say that it's important that we conform to the group. We have to get along with the group, as Hayat said. We have to work together. So you have to accept the group norms. But too much of conformity is not good. You agree? What happens when there is too much of conformity? Somebody answer that. What happens when there is too much of conformity with a group?
Ma'am, then someone will,
Kanishka?
ma'am, then someone will try to change their selves and it will not make them happy and they will not work positively.
Okay, Arbaz?
Ma'am, because different people have different way of thinking and then they will have to follow the norms no matter what.
Too much of conformity may lead to the destruction of their creative power.
Okay. What else? Aditya Sharma?
Ma'am, I believe it doesn't allow them to think more creative solutions.
Okay. Shiraz?
Ma'am, people will lose their individuality.
Right. So what happens when there is too much of conformity? All of these things happen. People may lose their individuality. People may have to agree to something that they don't really want to agree to. People may not like to be creative because there is no scope for creativity. You just have to agree with what the group is saying. In a lot of cases, this happens. It happens in reality. We have to conform because we can't disagree all the time. The group has to go on. Organization has to move forward. So many a times we just keep quiet, we agree with what the group is saying, we say, yes, boss, and we go on. But in the long run, in the short run, it is okay because there is no conflict. Everyone is saying yes, so let's go ahead. But in the long run, this hampers the creativity of the organization. It hampers the creative fabric of the organization. The innovative ideas that you want to engender, it hampers all of that because people will just stick to the group norms. They will just conform and they will not speak their individual ideas. They will not disagree where they really have to disagree. And then this is where, there will be, in a way, some kind of stumbling block will be there in terms of thinking differently, opining differently, working differently, being creative. Because to be creative, you have to be different. To be innovative, you have to think, as we say in a cliched manner, you have to think out of the box. You have to disagree. You have to be different. That is, innovation doesn't take place with, just riding with the norm. So you have to differ, and only then a new thought will emerge out of it. And it's okay for new thoughts to emerge because organizations have to be creative, they have to be innovative. So sometimes new ideas, new thoughts have to be there. Some disagreement is okay. So conformity is also important because all the time you can't disagree. All the time you can't have new thoughts coming up because that is too much of chaos. So conformity is important. If you want to work efficiently, when the group has to perform some basic tasks, some efficiency-based targets are there, then the group norm should be there and they should conform and fine. But when it's a brainstorming session, some problem-solving session is going on, when some creative ideas have to be proposed, when something new has to be done, then to conformity is not good. You have to balance that. They have your boss. You don't expect that all 9 people will say yes to you or they will agree to you. Be ready for disagreements. If somebody is disagreeing and disagreeing in a civilized manner, it's okay. Let people disagree. Let them say no. You have to be ready for a no. And out of that no, maybe if you think about it and you deliberate about it and you discuss it, maybe some new idea is born. And that new idea gives rise to something good for the organization. So too much of conformity is not good. And that is why we say too many norms are not very good for the organization. Some basic in terms of what we have, some commonality has to be there. Otherwise, there will be mismanagement and chaos. But too much of norms, too conformity, too much of agreement, too much of yes, boss, might not be good for the organization. It may be good for the boss because everything falls in place and goes smoothly and there is no dissension and no disagreement. So I'm happy as a manager. Everybody likes me and everybody does what I'm saying. So every manager wants that. Nobody wants conflict. Nobody wants disagreement. But for the organization, it's not very good. So too much of conformity is therefore not good. And that is why we say too many norms are not good. It's okay to have some norms, but too much of norms is not good. There's this very interesting experiment which was done by psychologists. Ask Group was behind this particular experiment, and they did this experiment on the role of norms. And some very interesting findings came out of this. What happened was that they conducted this experiment in several organizations, hundreds of organizations, and the same result was seen in almost all the places where the experiment was done. So what is this? It's a very simple experiment. What they did was, experimenters, that they called a group of 5-6 people, okay, on whom the experiment was done. And they showed this card to the group, this X card was shown to the group first. That, okay, another card was shown, this second card. Can you see this in this slide?
No.
Right, you can see this slide?
Yes,
all right. So the second card was shown, which is this A, B, C, the second card, okay? These 3 lines which are there. Now what they did was that in every group, let's say if there were 6 people, actually only one person was the subject of the study. You know what we mean by subject? on whom the study is being done. Only one person was the subject of the study. The other 5 already knew what the study is about and what they have to do. They had been told what they have to do. Only this last person was not told what he has to do. So he was the subject of the study. So they showed these 2 cards to all the people who were sitting there. And the experimenter said that there is a line X. And you have to look at the other card, A, B, C. And you have to tell us which line in the second card is similar to the line X. Now, what would be your answer? Which line in the second card is similar to line X?
B.
Okay, we would say B because B looks closer in terms of size or whatever. Now, all these 5 people, they had been told that you have to say A. So when the card was shown to the first person, he said A. When it was shown to the second person, I mean, it was shown to everybody together. When the second person was asked, he also said that yes, it's A. And when the third person was asked, the third person also said that yes, it's very clear. We can see very clearly it is A. So all these 5 people very confidently said A. And when the experimenters reached the 6th person and they asked him that which line is closest to X. Now what happened? What did the 6th person say?
He said A.
He said A. He said A because he felt that everybody is saying A, so it has to be A. I mean, how can 5 intellectuals sitting here, how can they give a wrong? Everybody is saying so confidently that it is A, so it has to be A. So the 6th person also said A. And this experiment, as I said, was done in several organizations across several countries. And in 90% of the cases, the same results were found, that the last person who was the subject of the study, he said A because the other persons were also saying A. What is this? We are just trying to be acceptable and agree with what everyone else is saying. So because everyone is saying A, so the answer has to be A, even though I know it's not A. So many a times the same thing happens in organizations, that people, they just agree because everybody is saying yes or everybody is agreeing. So just to keep everybody in, to please everyone or to make everyone happy or to keep the boss happy, or just because there is a fear that I don't want to disagree, I don't want to appear foolish. And because everyone is saying A, so the answer has to be A, so I am also saying A. So because I don't want to lose face and I want to agree with what everyone is saying, so we try to just go with the flow. And it happens. Every day when we sit in meetings, when we discuss things, most of the people in meetings, they just keep quiet because they know that, okay, let us say whatever is being said and it's fine. And see, the issue is that it's okay also. Agreeing is not a problem. If we agree, it's fine. If we are conforming with a norm, it's fine. But too much of conformity, as we discussed, is not fine. And that is the problem, that in most of the cases, people in groups, they just listen to commands and instructions from the leader and they just like to conform because they don't want to anger the leader. They don't want to go against the norm, and we just conform. And when that happens, too much of conformity actually stifles group work. So this experiment shows that we make wrong judgments, we give a wrong answer simply because we want to be, we want to conform with the norms of the group. So conformity might not be very good. But when we discuss conformity, which is one extreme, there is another extreme, which is, deviance or deviance, as some people call it. Deviance is the other extreme. Just like too much of conformity is also not good, too much of disagreement is also not good. Too much of extreme disagreement may give rise to deviant workplace behavior, extreme workplace behavior. Again, this is not good. If everybody is disagreeing, if all the time you are saying no, if you're not agreeing to any norm in the organization, then that is also not good. So too much of extremities are not good. So deviant workplace behavior, again, that is also harmful. You are violating all the norms. You are violating all the rules of the workplace. You are all the time disagreeing. That is also not acceptable. In extreme cases, people who indulge in deviant workplace behavior, they may indulge in antisocial actions, misconduct, even violence at the workplace, and so on. So that kind of extreme, of course, cannot be tolerated. So too much of defiance is also not good. So people disagree in different ways. They may start intentionally working slowly. They may start wasting resources. They start being negligent. They start leaving early. They start damaging, sabotaging. They may start doing a lot of other things, gossiping, spreading rumors, working against, fighting, and so on, misbehavior, verbal abuse. So too much of extreme behavior, of course, will be detrimental. So just like too much of conformity is also not good, outright disrespect, outright defiance also is not acceptable. So any kind of extremity is not acceptable. Too much of disagreement is also not good. Too much of saying no is also not good. So there is something which is norms, which is important, which we have to follow, but we have to ensure that too many norms are not there. So this is what the role of norms is. I'll take up this status also before we close. Anyway, we have 2 periods. So I'll just take up the status also before we close. Status is the third group property. So just like role are important, norms are important. The third thing is status. Status is the position or power that different people enjoy in a group. When you make a group, at least there are 2 positions which are there. At least one is the group leader, the others may be group followers. At least these 2 positions will be there. But what happens is that sometimes there may be different status that different people may start having. Let's say if you make a group of 5 people and one is the leader and there are 4 followers, will all 4 followers have the same position? Will they have the same status in a group? Answer me, someone. Mohammad Asad. Rafid.
Yes, ma'am.
Rafid, if you make a group and there is one group leader and there are 4 followers, naturally the group leader will have a different status because he has some powers, and the followers will have a different status. But will all these 4 people have the same status?
No, ma'am.
So why no? What will happen?
It changed every time, ma'am. The status will not follow the same. The team member have different
How is it
ideas.
that all 4 people may have different status in a group, despite the fact that they're all followers? Aisha Khan?
Ma'am, it could be because of level of participation in the group.
Okay, it could be because of level of participation. What else? What happens? Will all these?
It could be because of.
Nidan?
It could be because of their abilities and contribution to the project, and and even one of them may become a nominal leader as well because of his outstanding skills.
Right. What happens is that in a group, not everybody has the same say. Not everybody has the same power. Not everybody has the same influence. Not everybody has the same personality. We all have different personalities. We all have different competence. We all have different capabilities. And, our participation may differ. So some people work harder, some lesser, some have more dominating personalities, some not so dominating, some are extroverts, some introverts, some speak more, some speak less, some work more, some work less, some have more capabilities, some have less capability. So based on many of these things, some people may have more influence in the group. They may speak more, work more, whatever, influence others more. So they will have more status in the group. They will have more position, power in the group as compared to others. So not every follower will be similar. They will have different status. And so in a group, what happens is that based on individual power, based on individual contribution, and based on individual characteristics, your personality, your contribution, your power, your ability, your strength to do things, and so on and so forth. As a result of that, you may have a different status in the group as compared to somebody else. So every person in a group may have different status. They may not be the same. And as a result of that, people who have a higher status, they acquire that. by virtue of their power or position or contribution or efforts or personality or dominance, they acquire a certain status, a certain position or rank. And as you rightly said, one of them may become an informal leader also. He may start dictating or governing and whatever. So the person who has higher status, he has more authority. He acquires more authority to deviate from norms. He acquires more authority to assert. He acquires more authority to be different. So he starts influencing the group. So people in a group, even if they are followers, in terms of formal position, they may be the same. In terms of designation at which they are working, they may be the same. Yet some people may be more powerful than others. Some people may be more influential than others. So it means that some people will have a higher status as compared to some others. Now, this happens everywhere in all groups. So group status will differ. Now, is it good or bad? Is it okay to have this, or what should leaders do? Should they minimize this or let it happen? What is it? Is it fine? Can somebody answer that? Arham, can you answer that? Laiba?
Yes, ma'am.
If somebody is not answering, we are going to mark you absent because we assume you're not there. At least respond. Laiba?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so
Yes, ma'am.
is it okay? Is this phenomenon fine? Should we allow this to happen? What I discussed just now. Did you listen to what I said?
Yes, ma'am.
So is it fine to let this happen, or what should we do? What would you do as a group leader?
Ma'am, I will instruct what should be done for the betterment of the for the company. So I will
okay, Arham?
give different perceptions regarding that. And everybody has different perception in every group.
Okay, is it okay, Arham, to have this kind of a phenomenon existing? Is it acceptable to you as a group leader? What would you do?
Yes, ma'am, it is fine to have this group
So what
structure.
happens? What happens when somebody starts asserting too much, influencing too much? Is it fine? Will that not hamper group working?
Ma'am, leadership is about taking everyone together and not just giving commands and being powerful and showing that power, the authority that is given.
Okay, Lata, do you agree? Will that not lead to too much of dissension, too much of problems in the group? What is the purpose of making a group? We are making groups so that everybody works together and there is some output and some outcome of that. If everybody disagrees, if everybody starts dominating, everybody starts influencing, will that not hamper? It's very nice to say that groups, leaders should accept this and accept that, but when you truly become a leader, is it okay? Will one be able to tolerate all those disagreements, dissensions, everybody becoming powerful, everybody disagreeing, everybody influencing? Is this okay? Is this okay for a group to work like that?
Yes, ma'am. I think as a team leader, we have to coordinate with the teammates. We have to listen to everyone, and then sometimes we have to take stand. All the group members, we have to give the final decision, and we have to assign the task as per their tasks.
Okay, so what about, I'm talking specifically about status. So when this happens, when people start influencing, is it okay?
I think we have to listen every team members.
Okay, all right. So naturally, see, we know that the basic purpose of a group is to ensure that there is smooth implementation of the activity or the assignment or the task which has been entrusted to the group, and that is how the group will be able to attain its outcome. But this is, as we said, and as many of you rightly pointed out, that this is something which is a given. It will be there. There will be some people who will be more powerful. There would be some people who would be more influential in a group, depending on their personality traits and characteristics and so on. So they will definitely try to dominate the group, and they will try to influence, and they will try to have, more, they will assert more, and they will differ more, and so on. Now, this is something which will be there. We have to accept that it will be there. And in a previous slide, when we were discussing norms, we discussed that too much of conformity is not good. So organizations which are dynamic, organizations which encourage experimenting, organizations which encourage new thoughts and innovation and creativity, they give freedom to people to differ to a certain extent, or assert and deviate from norms and so on. They accept these things. And in the present times, in the kind of environment that we are existing now, organizations have to realize that they have to be dynamic. They cannot just have some norms, and they cannot have people just following those norms. Because if that happens, the group will be very efficient, but it will not be very effective. It will not. So if you want to be innovative, and you have to be innovative in today's times, because if organizations do not innovate, they will die a natural death. So therefore, in that case, some amount of, as we said, and we already discussed that, some amount of differences and disagreements, or new thoughts and different ideas, it's okay. So we have to accept as leaders that there will be some differences. Some people will deviate, some people will assert, some people will be different depending on their influence, and it's okay to accept that, because not everybody is equal. So if somebody is more extrovert, if somebody is speaking more, it's fine to give them a platform to let them speak. Otherwise, if they are not allowed to speak, they will express their disagreement in some other manner. They might become indisciplined. They might start resorting to some of these things that we just now discussed. So you have to give them a channel to speak out. You have to give them a channel to vent out their expressions and whatever feelings they have. Sometimes it's okay to let them disagree. Sometimes it's okay to let them differ and assert and so on. But that is where the group leader's role is very crucial. How much freedom to give, how much differences to tolerate and let them be there, how much deviation to allow. That is something where group leader's role is very, very critical, because you cannot have too much of deviation. You cannot have too much of differences or disagreements, because then of course the group will not work effectively. So balancing all of these things is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very critical task that leaders have to take upon themselves. And that is why leadership training is very important. Leadership mentoring the leader, the leader, and training the leader itself is very important. So, and this is something which will not take place in one day. You have to have a culture, an organizational culture, where people trust each other. They know their limits also. They know how much I have to disagree, how much respect I have to give, and at the same time, how much individuality I'm allowed, and I can differ and so on. So you have to have a culture where people trust each other. You have to have a culture where everybody respects each other. The leader respects the followers respect the leader, and so on. And that is when this kind of a phenomenon can positively prevail in an organization. Otherwise, as we said, that otherwise things will fall apart, deviation will take place, defiance will start taking place, and the group will not work efficaciously. So it's okay to have people, have people individuality, because people do have individuality. Let them speak, let them differ, let them have their own independent minds, because anyway, that will lead to fresh ideas, fresh thoughts, that will also lead to creativity and innovation. But how much difference, how much deviation to allow, how much freedom to allow to people to assert and influence, that's also something that we have to be careful about. So it's all about a very, very delicate balance, because see, in organizational behavior, we are not talking about products or technology or machines or equipments. We're talking about human beings. And balancing all of these human emotions and human phenomenon, it's a very, very sensitive, very critical thing to do. So that is where, as we said, the role of culture is very important. The role of leader is very important. The role of many other things, the communication which is taking place, trust, autonomy, all of these things, innovation, kind of innovation taking place, how it is taking place, all those things are important. So it's about creating a culture and putting in place a culture where things go on smoothly, people differ, disagree, and yet there is a certain flow in which they are flowing. So that is what we have to ensure. So status is there. It's an important aspect of group working. So I think there are other things also, other properties of the group which are there. What do we do? Take them up today, or should I stop? Although we had 2 classes, but Zareen?
Ji, ma'am. Ma'am, if you like, you can take up in the next class. It's all up to you, ma'am. Maybe.
Okay, so I think just 2-3 aspects are left to be discussed in terms of group structure and property. So fine, we can take it up in the next class. No issues. We have already covered most of the things, so not an issue. We can take it up in the next class, right? Yes, students, is there anything that you want to ask? Let me know, otherwise we can close for today. Okay, if it's fine, then I think we can close for today. You can leave. Zareen, please stay back. I just want to talk to you. Rest of you can leave.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.